Okay, 81. You good? Okay, thank you so much.
I can't get the PowerPoint, so. If he has any PowerPoint,
Oh, good. Yeah, we should be fine.
okay, yeah, it kind of glitched a little bit.
Okay.
Just the bottom, things, the wire that we have, it's getting interference.
Okay.
Online student so far.
Hope they're good, right?
We are
Yeah.
aware.
Okay. Okay, yeah, well, we know it's gonna be, we can let you know, but,
Well, let's do join it. You want to see that.
okay. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
I know we're not supposed to ask you questions.
Go ahead.
Because you're the grader, one of the graders, right?
I'm not a grader for this class.
Well, okay, what? Excuse me, say that way, but, my name is John. I didn't know, catch your.
Micah.
Michael?
Micah.
Yes. Micah?
Yes, sir.
That name's something else.
It's okay.
Do you have any idea what our test is about, what, area to study at more?
I don't know about the specific assignments in this class, because I'm going to lecture today, but I am not grading for this class. Do y'all know who the grader is in here? Is it Taylor or is it Brett? Oh, Brett Johnson.
I thought you were graders.
So no, that's okay. But Brett is in California, so you have to send him an email or something like that. Yeah, or I mean, Dr. Alders too. Is that what y'all have it? Okay. Taylor, you don't have any more information on the exam?
On the exam, yes,
No?
that is coming up for Genesis.
No, I'm
On
sorry.
Sunday. Yeah, on Sunday.
You know anything about it?
That's the extent of what I know.
Okay.
I think the announcement that we put.
Make sure you all Genesis before you.
Yeah,
Well,
I've done
yeah,
that 3 times already.
You should.
Yeah.
Was
And you
on-
probably wrote
I
that
had to
thing.
read all the whole thing.
Yeah.
No,
No, he wrote that. Quiz.
What do you mean?
It's the J sword. J sword. He's the JB on Melon.
That you didn't see it, that's all.
The only thing in the announcement, he just said closed book, closed notes. So after you read it, just
Just trusting God.
If it was anything like the Genesis.
As a
if
city.
it's like survey, it would not be easy. If it was like a survey, it would not be easy.
Yeah.
That was the loser.
Survey.
Survey could meet, but I'm glad it was open by.
The second one helped me with the prophets and the,
Yeah.
whatever.
Then you have an entire writing. So it's like this.
I spent 3 hours reading cheat sheets and nothing on my cheat. Damn.
Hey, no, that was cheat sheet was good. But your cheat sheet was great.
No.
That cheat sheet was awesome.
Yeah.
Next cheat sheet. The whole test.
Hey, normally I'm like, if I'm not.
Hey, Bo.
This last week.
Put that phone up.
So in our last budget before the exam, he goes to campus. He tells us like he's like briefing us on the exam, like what it's gonna be. And he opens this canvas thing. He's like, this is what the test may look like. So I'm like, if there's some questions that are on the test, they're on this, I'm gonna report the entire thing and use that.
I have some questions.
I can see the entire thing, write out every single question on that. And he shows some canvas.
You can see.
Yeah, two answers. Got my cheat sheet.
Oh my.
Yes, it was the test.
There's no
So he didn't know that he was doing that.
It was the test.
He didn't know he was doing that.
If you can't, let me know.
Lead ignorance. Wait, what?
That's so unfair.
All of us. took
I mean,
that test.
Yeah.
Oh. I'm just gonna do this fine.
No, you already took it. Already took it.
They-
I'm still like.
If anybody takes a Genesis exam,
Yeah, so the next one.
This one?
Just.
Yep.
So you can fit it in all the questions in there. I need to put mine in. Use that.
It goes- No, I'll take.
Exams on steroids. It's just one question, and you just type all of Genesis from.
No.
If I just totally know about it, it should be okay, right?
I've heard that.
It's down. Down.
Yeah, but
He makes it off our knowledge. That's great because what's so. I mean, this is true, but like.
Oh, no.
It's one question. You need to know is this right? It's like, yes or no, yes or no.
Yeah, cook.
Yes, see, that's the goal. So you make it like nobody knows.
Really?
Yeah, I saw them walking in Walmart. So
They
they
have
have.
somebody got called.
It's better because this I walk in Walmart.
You talk to him?
So it doesn't should have got away.
Okay.
Nope.
Actually, he chased him down.
I'm gonna give a charge.
Man, we packed today.
Costume.
Do I get one?
Yeah. Everybody did.
Crazy. Give me a cheap first, because I'm.
Bro, the
Wi-Fi had not worked one day also.
Super.
It doesn't have to be extravagant costumes, just you get the idea of something else.
Yeah,
I can also see it. I think it's good. Yeah. AJ can pass that. I think we're good.
Slow.
Come on.
It's, be for real.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be anyone at the tables. Everyone at the tables.
It's just gonna be 50 questions.
Gonna be.
So in the video, we're asking a question, what kind of hint is that?
We need
All
to-
very much.
That's expected.
And then that's just the workers.
Well, the problem is,
We're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
every assignment he's ever talked about is like the easiest assignment he's ever.
Nobody gets up.
But then he explains it.
Yeah.
And it's super hard. That's exactly how it's tested for you. Oh, yeah, just take your exam, it's not that bad. As long as you read Genesis, you'll be fine. But then it's like,
Yeah.
this Genesis 20 verse 5 saying.
Yes.
You just try hard enough.
If we use try hard enough, the spirit will.
People make to.
The burning back to memory. then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was great.
God predestined me to make 100 on that 6 a.m.
It's just so.
Yeah.
You're part of the brethren now.
We're working on the Easter video too, so we got.
These videos, they're all brothers.
I talked about this the other time. Some type of internship with the church.
Dude,
I am a new.
I get like out this.
If there is no. position.
Oh, very first, that's the very first exam for Old Testament. What it's like, what do you make Jacob read? Yes, and I'm like, perfect, okay. I know what he wants.
I know exactly what you want, Jeff. I know it.
Sorry, choice.
All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and start getting started here. So I just texted Alder. She says, just remember to complete your exam by Sunday night at midnight. That's all I have.
You can ask him like, what type of questions to expect,
I mean,
something like
like
that.
Preview of it.
Yes.
You have access.
Read the book. Oh, sorry, I don't have any, but that's what he sent me. So anyways, let me just tell you, I'll introduce myself. Obviously I'm not Dr. Ardersh or Jeff, y'all would call him.
Jeff,
I call the doctor.
he does.
Someone trying to be respectful, so yeah, at least someone. No, I know less than you call him. So anyways, I'm obviously not Jeff. Jeff is out today, but he asked me to come to lecture. My name is Mike Barksdale. I'm a PhD student studying Old Testament and focusing particularly in the book of Psalms for like dissertation purposes. But today, so we're talking about the book of Genesis. So I'm really excited to be here with y'all because I just don't think there's anything that's like more fun than just getting to work through the Bible and just read stories and talk about them together. So I'm really excited we get an opportunity to do that today. Just for the purpose of this class, we've kind of got a lot of material to cover. So we're starting Genesis 22, and then we have to finish Genesis today. So we've got a lot of stuff. So we're gonna try to keep it kind of tight. We're gonna keep to maybe 25 minutes to talk about Abraham and Isaac, Genesis 22, maybe 25 minutes to talk about Jacob, maybe 25 minutes to talk about Joseph. Like I said, we've got to keep it kind of tight there. And you had some reading, some articles. What articles did y'all read?
Patriarch.
Okay. Everything. Okay. Those are the two for this week. Okay. We might have time to talk about those. We might not. I'll have to see where we get, because I really want to spend the most of our time today in the text if we can. So I'm going to try to stick in the text and walk through the stories. If you have questions or the articles relate to things we're talking about, you're welcome to bring them up. We can talk about those as well, but we may not get into the depths of those. So that might be a conversation for later when Jeff's back or something like that. So anyway, let me pray for us and then we'll get started. All right. Lord God, thank you for this afternoon, this opportunity for us to gather together to open your word. Thank you for the opportunity to study the Bible. Pray that we would be able to pay close attention to the text, that we would learn, that we would focus today, God, that we would grow closer to you through our study of the text. That you just bless our time together to be able to just grow in our knowledge, and that it would pour out into the ministry and the ways that we're ministering to people around the city, everyone here in this room in different capacities and different ways, God. So you're in prayer. Amen. All right. So today we're going to talk about the theme of blessing and curse. That's the way where, since we have a lot of material to kind of cover, I figured we kind of try to find a theme and we try to trace it through as we're going to kind of hold things together, since we're covering a lot of text. So we're going to keep that in mind. So with that being said, what a question for anybody to answer. What is a theme in the Bible? How do you describe a theme in the Bible? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that'd be a good way to point out that it reoccurs. Okay. Anything else about like a theme or how we would identify one or anything like that in the Bible?
Say a focus of a passage.
Okay.
Like it's clearly separating the idea of this chapter.
Okay. Yeah. So it could be like a main focus or a main idea. And so you're talking about like specific passages, we see a theme start to pop up. And then like Carter's kind of said too, then when we start to see that repeated over and over and over, then we're like, oh, this is something that's pretty important to the biblical authors, because it happens in this story, happens in this story, happens in this book, it happens in the New Testament. Then we're like, oh, okay, that's something we should probably look out for and pay attention. The other thing that can happen with themes is they set like a pattern for you, right? So a pattern starts to get set, and then you expect A happens, then B happens, and C happens. You might come across something like that, but then because authors can use these themes to be intentional to try to articulate something to us, because writing is like an artistic endeavor, and sometimes they'll take the theme or the pattern that you've been accustomed to, and then they like break it or they change it, but just a little bit, but it's enough for you to be like, hey, that was supposed to happen, but it didn't. Something else happened. So then that like really draws your attention to it. So I would say all throughout the Bible, there are all these like themes that are going to be started. A lot of like most of them, if you read Genesis, like just read Genesis over and over, and you write down every theme, and then you read the rest of the Bible, you're going to find like, oh, all these themes that they started in Genesis, a lot of them started in Genesis 1-3, actually the very beginning of the Bible, they're just picked up and they're reused and they're mentioned over and over and over again. So you can read like Genesis and Revelation together, and you can look, and you can find all kinds of themes that are in both places. And then you read the whole Bible, and you're like, oh man, they're all the way throughout. Because the biblical authors, they're like literary geniuses who are connecting all these things together. So that's just to prep us a little bit. So we're going to talk about a theme today. We're going to think about blessing and curse and how that functions in the book of Genesis to push the literature along, so that we're understanding from like a literary aspect, and then also like a theological aspect, what is going on in the book of Genesis in these particular shorts. Okay, so like I said, today we're starting with Genesis 22. I'm going to back up just a little bit to give us like kind of a running start on this kind of theme of blessing as we get into Genesis 22. My son, Simeon, he's 4, and he just started to ride a bike. And so anytime he gets on his bike, though, he can ride it, but he can't start it. So he's like, I need you to give me a head start. That's what he called it. Yeah, you got to give me a head start. So I, hold him on his bike and I push him out there, and he just pedals and then he goes. So this is our little head start. So we've got to take a step back. So we can take a head start. We'll get into Genesis 22. So let's go back to Genesis 1. Okay. So Genesis 1, what's happening? God is creating everything, right? And so go to Genesis 1, verse 20. And if somebody want to read verse 20 through 23, let's go ahead and read the whole fifth day right here.
And God said, let the waters swarm with forms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day.
Okay, thanks. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about in this section, and probably things that you have talked about in this class already. But the thing I want to draw your attention to, since we're talking about blessing, is that this is this first instance of God blessed them. So God blesses these creatures. And then what does the blessing consist of? He blessed them and he says, what?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful, multiply, fill the waters, seeds, and let the birds multiply on the earth. So this idea of blessing, when God blesses something, it's fruitful, it multiplies, it becomes more, it fills. Okay, all of these kinds of things are tied into this idea of blessing. But part of the reason, right, is that God is the creator of God. That God brings life, God brings things into existence. And so right here, we're seeing that God brings creatures into this whole project that he's doing in the world, right? That he's going to bless the world. He's going to do it through these kinds of means of creatures. Okay, but we need to get like a little bit more specific. So we need to go to Genesis 1:28 here. And then here's what we see, God talking to humankind now. 28, and God blessed them in verse 28. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And there's an added part here, and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heaven and over every animal that moves upon the earth. So now we have a blessing for humanity, right? So they get this blessing, and their blessing consists of a couple things, right? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. They're supposed to rule over the earth. So if you're thinking about this, put this in your mind a little bit as we go forward, because we'll be looking for this more as we go. But there's these couple aspects to this blessing. There's filling, there's multiplying, and there's ruling, right? So they're going to fill the earth and the land. They're going to multiply. There's going to be more of them. And they're also going to rule over creation. Okay, so all these things going on here. All right. So then we've got to move on, because obviously, right, at this point, in Genesis 1 and 2, they're like in the garden. And so how does like this blessing work in the garden? They're like good or bad? Like easy, like it's good. Yeah, like it's awesome in the garden, right? The garden is the kind of place where everything is blessed. So when you're trying to fill and multiply, it's like, man, you drop a seed here and then a plant just sprouts up. You know, you're tending to this thing, and the ground is working with humans, and everything is just easy to produce. Like there's still work involved, but things are just happening, and there's just blessing, and it's an abundance. There's something for everybody, and God is providing for them, right? But then we get to Genesis 3, right? So you're already familiar. Again, we're going back over these things. You talked about these things, I'm sure, but we're getting this a little bit of a running start here. So Genesis 3, and then somebody tell me what happens in Genesis 3. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And how does it relate to what we're talking about right now with this blessing that God's blessed them? How do you think Genesis 3 fits into this as we're going? Okay, yeah, there's an introduction of curses. So we've already talked about blessings, and now there's curses, because as in Genesis 3, right, is that Adam and Eve have the opportunity that they can live in the blessing God has given them. And they can trust God that he's going to provide, that there's going to be enough, that there's going to be a blessing. Or they could say, no, I'm not going to trust God's blessing. I'm not going to trust what God has told me. And they're going to instead take from the tree of good and evil, because that's them redefining good and evil on their own terms. They're deciding, I'm not going to let God decide what's good. I'm going to decide what's good, and I'm going to reach out, and I'm going to take the thing that looks like a blessing to me. So now we're in this problem that's going to be all throughout Genesis, which is God is blessing his creation. Like he wants to bless them, and he wants to be a blessing through them. And he's told them that. He's told them he's going to bless them. He's told them he's going to give this thing to them. But humans are like so stubborn that they can't just accept the blessing that God gives them. They try to take it. But what are they doing? They're taking the thing that God's already told them he's going to give them. So why? But that's the struggle, the problem of humanity, of a God who's decided that he's going to dwell with humanity, that's going to work through them, is that they're going to try to take the blessing that God has already freely given them. Okay. So now we have this whole problem that their blessing being, God's blessing is being rejected. And we already mentioned the curses. So let's go to the curses for a second. And we'll just look at them briefly. So God's going to curse the serpent, right? And this is verse 14 in chapter 3. So he says to the serpent, because you have done this, you'll be cursed more than any domestic animal, and more than any wild animal. On your belly you shall go, on the dust you shall eat all the days of your life. And I will put hostility between you and between the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will strike you on the head, and you will strike him on the heel. And then he says to the woman, verse 16, I will greatly increase your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bear children, and to your husband shall be your desire, yet he will rule over you. And verse 17, and to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and you ate from the tree from which I forbade you to eat, the ground shall be cursed on your account. In pain you shall eat from it all the days of your life. And thorns and thistles shall sprout for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread, until you return to the ground, for from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So now we have the situation here where, like I said, the curses are being true. So the serpent is cursed, and the ground is cursed. It doesn't say specifically that the woman is cursed, but we do need to talk about like what's happening here with the woman with childbearing, because it says, so it's a little bit difficult to translate, but I think what is being gotten at here is that the difficulty is in conception. It will be difficult to conceive and to have children. That's the struggle that's going to happen. And why do I think that's specifically what it's referring to? Well, one we could do, we're not going to go like a deep dive into the Hebrew because this isn't like a Hebrew exegesis class. You can do that, but also, what happens when you just read the book of Genesis? What is one of the key problems that happens over and over in the book of Genesis?
See an issue with barren women.
Yeah, like barren women. Like women cannot conceive because it's difficult to conceive. This is something for me, like I never, obviously, like I didn't think about this much when I was in like middle school or high school or even college. I never thought about the difficulties of conception or anything like that. That's just not like a conversation. I was like, as soon as I moved to seminary, like I noticed so many people that I knew who were married and like wanted to have children, and it was a struggle. It was hard. Like they tried to have children, but it didn't work. So it's just a real struggle that's just present in our everyday life. But why is that? So look back. Remember, we talked about what's the blessing? Bless, fill, multiply, rule. So what are the curses now? It's the reverse of that. It's going to be hard to fill. It's going to be hard to multiply. Right? The ground, the thing that you need to receive a blessing, right? The ground gives you the blessing, gives you the food, it gives you everything you need to sustain so that you can have security, so that then you can bless your family, but then also you can bless others. But it's difficult to get that. The ground doesn't just sprout things up, but you don't just drop the seed and a plant just sprouts up anymore. And it's not so easy to multiply, right? And so then the other problem is the ruling, right? Because man and woman are supposed to rule over creation together, but now even they're going to be at odds with one another. They're going to be arguing. They're going to be fighting. They're going to be the fights for power between the men and man and woman now, right? So then, like now here we have another problem like going on is that all these people, everyone that we read in the story of Genesis, right? There's going to be conflict between these people. There's conflict between men and women. There's conflict between brothers. There's conflict between multiple wives that the patriarchs have, right? So now all these issues are like coming to the fore. So this is the curse. Okay. So then we'll just hit really closely or really quickly. We got Cain and Abel that comes right after, right? And so what happens with Cain and Abel? So God favors Abel's offering. And in an ideal world, so let's just think God blesses, he favors Abel's offering. And let's say God blesses Abel. In an ideal world, well, that's great. That's even great for Cain, because what is the blessing supposed to do? It's supposed to be an abundance that like spills out to everyone else. So if God blesses one of the brothers, well, the other brothers should be like, yeah, this is awesome because now we can share with me. Now we can all together have enough. But that's not what happens, right? So now with Cain and Abel, you see one brother is jealous. There's the strife that's between humanity now. And he looks around and he says, you know what? There's not enough to go around. There's not enough here because the ground is difficult to work. And so my brother has something, and now I'm jealous, and I want to take that thing that he has. but God's already promised to bless people, right? Now the conflict we have is that sin has entered the world. So that's not so easy of a thing to happen. So now we have all these conflicts that are coming, and this marks it. I mean, even we see here another kind of idea that happens is that the children of the parents often like intensify what their parents were like. So now like if Adam and Eve choose good and evil for their own terms and things like that, and then now they're in strife with one another and they're going to fight with one another. Well, now even like Cain and Abel, that it's going to be murder. They're going to kill each other. They're going to have so much hostility that there's going to be murder happening and killing, right? So we see that happen throughout the stories that the children, they're often just like the parents, which is the thing that like every kid is like, I'm not going to be like my parent, right? But like the stories in Genesis are like all over and over. Oh yeah, the kids are just like the parents. They just do the same thing that their parents do. Just in different circumstances. Okay. So then Abraham, right? We've got to move forward a little bit. So Abraham in Genesis 12, if y'all read that. So what does God say to Abraham in Genesis 12? What is this passage?
I'll make you a father of many nations.
Yeah. Let's go to Genesis 12. 12, and let's read, someone want to read 12, 1 through 3?
Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great, so you will be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Okay, great. So again, blessing, all right? So Abraham is going to be blessed, and he's going to bless like all the nations. So this is going to be awesome, right? So Abraham just needs to trust God and just do what he says to do, and there's going to be blessing everywhere, right? But you've already read like further in Genesis. So is that what happens?
Nope.
No. So then with that in mind, because I've talked too much in our run up and we actually have to get into Genesis 22, let's just read Genesis 22. So does someone want to read Genesis 22 for us, and we'll get moving.
The whole thing.
Yeah, can somebody read it?
After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, took two of his young men with him, and his son Isaac, and he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father, he said. Here I am, my son. He said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham. He said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by my word declares the Lord, you have not withheld your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham lived in Beersheba. Now and after all these things, it was told to Abraham, behold, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. Buz his firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlap, and Bethuel. Bethuel fathered Rebekah. These eight Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Moreover, his concubine, whose name was Reumah, bore Teba, Gama, Tehash, and Makah.
I meant to stop you right before the end, but it's always fun to hear someone try to pronounce the words.
Yeah.
It's awesome. That's great. So, okay, so Genesis 22. So what do we notice here? Anything let's start at the beginning. So Genesis 22:1, and then I want to hear y'all some things. What are some things that stick out or that you notice? We can keep this theme of blessing in our mind as well, but just other things about the text as well. So Genesis 22:1, what's something that sticks out to us here that we need to pay attention to?
God tested.
Okay. Yeah, that's really important to note that God is testing Abraham here. Now, Abraham doesn't seem to know this fully right now, but this is important for us as the audience. We know that it's a test as we're reading it, but it creates a conflict in the story for Abraham because we've got to see, okay, he's being tested, and we know that he's being tested, but what is he going to actually do in this test? Test is another thing that is all through Genesis, through the Bible. What do people do when they're presented with a test? And a test is not an inherently bad thing. You might feel differently because you have an exam coming up. You might be like, that's their bad. But a test is not an inherently bad thing because, let's just say hypothetically, you're getting tested by the content that you have in this class. Well, it's an opportunity that you could fail and you could show that you didn't really study well, you don't really know the content. But a test is also an opportunity for you to show, yeah, I've done my work and I know what I'm doing and I know the book of Genesis really well. I know what I'm talking about. So it's just a test is an opportunity. And it could be bad or it could be good depending on how you do on the test, right? So thank you. That's really important. The test right here. Okay. Other things that we note here. What's the test going to be?
Offer up Isaac, your only son, whom you love, to in a land of Moriah. So offering up his only kid.
Yeah.
That's your son.
Yeah. And you're getting it, like the emphasis here is take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Like in the narrative, there's like emphasize, it's like driving home the point to us. Like, oh man, like every one is like more like tough to be like your son you love. Yeah, Isaac, that one. And why is it a big deal? Other than the fact, obviously, no father would want to sacrifice their son. But also, why is it a big deal that he chose Isaac to be sacrificed?
He's promised that through Isaac will be the blessings.
Yeah.
He'd be blessed through Isaac and his line, not through Ishmael, his son that he had with Hagar.
Mm-hmm. And where is Ishmael right now?
He's been cast out.
Yeah, Ishmael's already gone. So Abraham has already lost one son, Ishmael, who goes out with Hagar. Now Ishmael is not the chosen son, but you will also notice that God does bless Ishmael, which is interesting because God gives these blessings in abundance. That's the thing that's happening here too, is that the human people in the stories often think there's only enough blessing for one person, or there's not enough blessing to go around, or we need to kind of hoard it over here. Well, God's like, no, I'm going to bless everybody, right? So he does that through the line of Abraham, but even Ishmael gets blessing. But Abraham has already lost one son. It's the point, right? Abraham's already lost one son. Now he's got another son, and this is the promised son who the blessing is supposed to come through. So if he sacrifices this son, he's not just sacrificing his son, he's sacrificing the blessing. He's giving up the blessing that God has promised, that he's been waiting all these years for, that he's been, obviously Abraham's been making plentiful choices, but here comes the pivotal moment where it's like, are you going to make the right choice? Okay, other things. What else are we noticing here in the text?
He says to go to the land of Moriah,
Okay.
and which I shall tell you.
Uh-huh. Does that seem important?
I think it's important because I see parents, it's also a worship on a place that people tell them.
Yeah, worship on places. Okay, yeah. That's possible. There's connection, and mountains are really important. Yeah, there's some debate about where exactly is Moriah. In Chronicles, they say that Moriah is like the place where Solomon's temple was built. So that's what it gets associated with in Chronicles. There's debate amongst, if you were to go and read critical scholars on what actually is Moriah doing, what is the place, what is it referencing in this story. We'll get all the way into that conversation. But Yeah, so a mountain, they're gonna go up a mountain, important kind of thing, okay? And they're gonna offer a burnt offering, a sacrifice. Isaac's gonna be a sacrifice. Well, what about child sacrifice? I guess we should talk about that for a minute. Child sacrifice. Yeah, it's not good. Okay, yeah. Later, it's not good. Okay, it's explicit. Yeah, it's later condemned in the Pentateuch, right? They should not do it, and it's condemned multiple times. So what does it tell us that the Bible, the Old Testament, has to condemn child sacrifice multiple times?
It happens, and it is a prevalent thing, especially in the area.
Yeah, in the ancient world, it's prevalent and it's happening somewhat frequently. And it seems to be that they believe that it's a God's prerogative to ask for child sacrifice. A God can do that, and if he asks for it, you do it. Even apparently, even amongst the people of Israel, because they repeatedly have to be told, "Don't do that. That's not what God asked for," right? But here, the great like strange irony or whatever you want to call it, weird thing is like, oh, God is asking for this. Now, again, we know it's a test because we're the reader, but Abraham doesn't know that yet. Okay. So then what else? Anything else that we want to point out as we're going through? We're moving from like verse 3 onward now. Other things that stick out in the text.
It specifies the kind of offering, a burnt offering, and later it kind of clarifies more of kind of what that burnt offering is for.
Okay.
It's interesting to see there.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Other things that we're noticing?
In verse 5, it says, I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. I don't know what the Hebrew is like, but like it implies Abraham was like, we're going to go and we'll both come back.
We will worship and we will return. Yeah.
But he knows he's assuming he has to kill him.
So and interpreting it through Hebrews,
He knows.
Yeah, it gets that kind of question of like, what do we do? I mean, seeing how Hebrews interprets the text,
Yes,
confident in the resurrection, or how it seems.
yeah. Hebrews seems to indicate that Abraham has some kind of trust that even if he delivered his son to death, that God would bring him back to him somehow, right? Here, yeah, we seem to have like hints of that, but it's not explicit, and that's probably part of like the narrative technique of Genesis. It's that in Genesis, he's saying we're going to come back, but then we're asking the question: does he really think they're going to come back, or is he just saying that so that Isaac hears that, so Isaac doesn't get the wrong idea, doesn't catch on to what's happening, or so that the servants don't know what's happening? So we're still like in the midst of, we're still kind of wrestling with Abraham here, trying to figure out what's going to happen, what's he going to do. But it is super important to note. He says, we will return back to you. There seems to be something there. Okay. And they go up.
Why wouldn't they believe that he'll turn back? Because he's already promised it about his son, the future of everything.
Yeah.
So he has to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, he absolutely should. The only like tension that we have though is that Abraham constantly doesn't trust God in the book of Genesis so far. Like there are moments where he absolutely should believe that that's what God will do.
Right.
Yeah. But what happens it wasn't much earlier, right? When we have the problem of barrenness and Abraham doesn't have a son yet. And what does he do?
He tries to take it into his own hands.
Yeah.
Sarah gives her servant Hagar to him.
So he has a child through Hagar, because that's Abraham saying the plan, the promise, the blessing, it's not coming soon enough. It's not happening the way that I think it should. Let me take this into my own hands and try to accomplish a blessing for myself. It's the struggle we're talking about here. God wants to bless people. Okay. He's working to bless through them. And over they're saying, I'm going to take things into my own hand. So that's the question here. We say, is Abraham going to try to take things into his own hands again? Is he going to do the thing that seems to make sense? If you're trying to keep the blessing for yourself, what would you do? Say, God, I'm not doing that. I'm keeping Isaac because that's the way that I'm going to be blessed, which is what you told me you're going to do. Okay. So then that's the question. So he's going to go up. All right. And they go up and they have the conversation, and God tells them, don't worry. Or Abraham tells us, God will provide. Okay. He'll provide a lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So again, we have this sense of like, okay, there's still a little tension in the narrative because we're not certain, but we're like, okay, it seems like Abraham is trusting God. He's doing what he's supposed to, but he could just be telling Isaac this as they're walking. It's possible in the narrative, at least, like we could imagine that he may just be telling Isaac that, or at least that Abraham's like, I think God's going to do what he needs to do. I think he's going to provide, but I don't know how yet. We're going to keep going and we'll see. Another thing is that like it takes them so long to walk there takes him 3 days. So this is also something it's not a split decision for Abraham. It's not like Abraham can just say, okay, God, let's get this over with. No, he's got to like sit with this for days as they walk with his son, like right there with them, thinking through it. So it's just emotionally like such a like hard story to work through. That's just like pulling at everything as you walk with Abraham, like slowly to Mount Moriah. Even some things in the narrative kind of start to slow down, and it tells you like every detail of the conversation and stuff. Usually, Hebrew narrative is very like it doesn't give a lot of details. Sometimes it can be pretty like move to the next thing pretty quickly, and there can be gaps left. But here, some of those things are filled with like this is the conversation they had while they're walking and stuff. So it's slowing you down where you're like walking. If you've ever read The Lord of the Rings, you get to like the last book and you're walking with Frodo and Sam, and it just takes forever. And you're like walking, you're reading the book, and you're like, are they ever going to get to the mountain to throw the ring in? It's kind of like that, like a little bit, but obviously, like Tolkien's like on steroids because you feel exhausted. You physically feel exhausted from reading when you walk with Sam and Frodo, and I think you're supposed to because their journey is exhausting. And so here, there's like a little bit of slowing down to be like, yeah, you're going to walk with Abraham for just a second as we go on through this. Okay. As we keep going, other things that we note. Let's maybe move a little bit further down. So we get to so like verse 10. Let's see. Yeah. Let's go ahead. So Abraham has bound Isaac and put him on the altar. Verses 10 and 11 and 12 as we're going on. So what happens actually?
Abraham, his son on the altar, and gets him ready to sacrifice.
So he's going to obey. So we finally see, well, okay, Abraham is going to do the thing that God has asked him to do. He's going to sacrifice the blessing. He's going to give up the blessing that God has promised to him. And he's going to say, God, I don't know how you're going to provide this blessing, but I'm not going to take it into my own hands to figure it out. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do what you've asked. But then, of course, the angel of the Lord calls out and tells him to stop. And so, well, like, this is awesome. The boy is saved. And so then the angel says, hey, like, I know that you fear God and that you are listening and doing what you're supposed to now. Okay. So then he calls the place Yahweh will provide because he provides the ram. Trying to make sure there's nothing else that we really need to note here. Is there anything else that y'all are noticing here that you want to point out in this section?
Isaac didn't fight Abraham. At least it's not mentioned textually.
What's not mentioned?
Isaac didn't fight Abraham.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, in a lot of Jewish interpretation of this story, there's a lot of emphasis on Isaac. Because Isaac is old enough to carry like the wood and things. So he's old enough to do that. So you would think he might be able to fight his elderly father at this point, if he wanted to. So in Jewish interpretation particularly, there's a lot of emphasis on Isaac and the fact that he doesn't struggle and he must trust God as well. Yeah, it's a good point.
In verse 7, Abraham says that, or not at 7, but 8.
Mhm.
Well, in verse 7, Isaac asks, where's the lamb? And then in verse 8, God will provide a lamb, but then God never provided a lamb.
He provides a ram. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you think there's something important there? Or
Maybe there's something to come in the future. The narrative.
Yeah. So he does provide a lamb. But yeah, a say. But there's no say. That's Hebrew. There's no lamb. There's a ram instead. So it is interesting. But it just leaves us, yeah. We'll leave that one there to think about. I think that's worth walking around and thinking about for a little while. That's a good observation. There's the ram there. Okay. So then verse 17, let's go down. Okay. What happened to verse 17 then?
Break verse blessing.
Yeah, so we're going back to the blessing again, the blessing form. So he is going to be blessed. I will multiply your offspring, the stars of heaven, the sands, and your offspring will take possession of the gate of his enemies. And then to verse 18, all the nations of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring because you've listened to my voice. So now the blessing is going to happen, right? And the blessing is not going to just stay with Abraham and his family, but it's going to actually extend to the nations and all these other places. And they're going to be blessed through you. So I think we've already hit on the topic of blessing as much as, I want to try to emphasize it here that if we think about like what we've set up, we started in Genesis 1, right? We've seen that God wants to give a blessing to people and he wants to use them to bless the world. And he's going to work through humans, but they're constantly fighting him because they're trying to take the blessing he's willing to give them freely. And that's part of the story of Abraham's life. It's like he's trying to take the blessing that God has already told him. And it's not until this point in Genesis 22 when Abraham finally releases and he says, okay, I've been trying to take and scheme to get the blessing myself, but at this point, God, I'm going to trust you. Okay. I'm just going to trust you and you've promised this blessing. So this does not make any sense to me, but I'm going to do the thing that you've asked me to do. And he goes and he does it. But then there's like more children in the story, right? So the story goes on and then the family of Abraham continues on. And what we already know earlier is that a lot of times the children are a lot like the parents. They do a lot of the same things and a lot of the negative characteristics of the parent. So then let's move on. We need to move to Genesis 25 now. We need to talk about Jacob. So we have Isaac, who comes from Abraham, and then we have Jacob. Now, Isaac does not have a lot of stories that are just focused on him. One of the key things Isaac does do you know what Isaac does? His wife?
He must have raised a sister.
Which who already did? Yeah, so he does it again.
Like their dad.
Yeah. So we see that Isaac is kind of like his dad. Okay, so we do get that story where we see, okay, Isaac, it's carried on that kind of negative gene of lying to people, of being being a trickster, a deceiver. It's carried on, and then it's just going to be like just emphasized even more. It's going to be the key trait of Abraham's grandson Jacob. So let's read in Genesis 25. Can somebody read verses 19 through 34? Genesis 25, starting in 19.
These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel of the Aramean of Padanaram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, If it is to be this way, why do I live? So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and the two born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, and his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skilled hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of the game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and stole his birthright to Jacob, and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so now we're introduced to Jacob. We're going to figure out what is Jacob like, and we're going to see it even from the very beginning when he's born. We're going to start to get a view of his character and what kind of person Jacob is going to be. Because what happens here with, in terms of the blessing here, so what are we going to get here? Okay, verse 23. What does Yahweh say? Important to us here.
2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. One shall be stronger than the other, the older shall serve the younger.
Okay, yeah. So that part, that seems pretty important. Okay, so the blessing here, Yahweh has already declared it's going to go to the young. Okay. Now, maybe it's worth pointing out that, like, at this point, one of the things that's happening throughout Genesis, I've already like alluded to it, but God is going to bless specific people in particular ways. That blessing is always meant to go out to others, right? It's not meant to be hoarded. So he's going to bless the younger. It's a reversal of what you would expect in the ancient world, that usually the firstborn is the one that's going to get the major blessing, or like the double portion, right? But here, he's going to bless the younger one, which is a surprise. Maybe not a complete surprise, because we know that God does this quite frequently. But it's a surprise for like ancient custom. But what we see is that even though this promise has been made from the time he's in his mother's womb, he's going to be blessed. So if you're Jacob and you were blessed before you even came out of your mother's womb, then you should be like, man, okay, well, that's going to be good. It's going to be awesome. I got nothing to worry about. I'm just going to live in God's blessing, and I'm going to bless others, and it's going to be awesome. And if we were in the Garden of Eden, maybe that would be what would happen. But of course, we're not. And we've already seen that Abraham and Isaac are the kind of people who often try to scheme, and they try to plan, and they try to figure out how they can get a blessing for themselves and trick the people around them. And now Jacob, he comes out, and what is he already doing as he comes out and is born? He's grabbing the heel. So why is he grabbing the heel? It's like an indication he's trying to get ahead, right? It's like pulling back at it. Obviously, like that's what it's trying to communicate to us, that even from the beginning, Jacob is the kind of person, and his character is that he's trying to trick people. He's trying to get ahead. He's trying to get the blessing, even though it's already been promised to him. But he's trying to take it in these crazy ways. So all through the story, what's going to happen is that Jacob's going to be scheming to get a blessing, but God's already like promised to bless him. And so God will bless him. And it's just, there's all these like interesting connections going on through these stories of like, you try to take the blessing, and he does actually achieve the blessing, but he does it in a way that was like kind of not what you would expect, where he thinks he's scheming to get a blessing, but actually it's like, God just already told you you're going to have the blessing. So this is the way that he's going about and doing that and giving you that blessing. Okay. So then there's the twins, and we get Jacob and we get Esau. And Esau's a little different than Jacob because he's a man of the field, right? He's very manly, and he's hairy, and he goes out and makes food. And he comes in and he says, give me some of that red stuff, which is really good, right? In Hebrew, he says Edom. So he's like, and he says it twice. He's like, give me some of that Edom. So that's what he's asking for there. So you get this impression where you're like, okay, this is kind of like,
I like red beans and rice.
yeah, it might be. He's a Cajun. So he's coming in, and that's why he's called Edom, because he's asked for the Edom, right? He comes in asking for that. That's the food. But he's not even calling it like whatever kind of specific food it is. He's just like, I need some of that red right there. Give me some of that to eat. So then we get the idea that Jacob is going to be able to trick his brother, right? Like Esau was willing to give up the birthright for a bowl of food. Okay, not a great idea, but he's like, I'm so hungry. Whatever, you take it. Okay, I'm gonna die. I'm so hungry, so you got to give me this food. So then we already see right here, Jacob comes out and he's the trickster. Anything else that sticks out in this text that you want to know? Yeah.
27.
Yeah.
Kind of contrast their different statures.
Okay. Yeah. Give you two different pictures of two different brothers that do different things. Yeah. Okay. Great.
I see favoritism in verse
Favoritism.
28.
Okay, that's good. That is really important, that there is favoritism. And that's one of the things we talked about, that in like the Eden world, people would be working together, and they'd be bringing about and ruling creation together. But now what we see, that there's always this favoritism, and there's picking one or the other. And why does Isaac prefer Esau?
He's a man's man.
He's a man's man, yeah.
I see the meat that he goes get.
And also he makes food. So he's like, I like the food that he gets. What could I say? Like the food, it's awesome. So I prefer him. And then what do we see? Like it's like father, like son thing here, because now Esau comes and he's willing to trade his birthright for some food. Because he's like, man, yeah, like just like Isaac, man, he loves some food, and he's going to pick a favorite son because he's bringing in the good food. Well, then Esau's going to be like that. He's like, okay, yeah, I love food too. So I'm willing to give up my birthright here for the food that's going on. Okay. Then this is where we get to the story of Isaac and Abimelech that we referenced earlier, right? That Isaac, this is one of the stories that really emphasizes him. He's just like Abraham. He's going to pawn off his wife as his sister because he thinks it's going to preserve his life. So again, God's going to bless him, but he's going to try to take it himself by doing what he thinks is going to be the right thing. But even here's the thing that's crazy that happened in these stories. Genesis 26:12. So after these things happen where he tricks Abimelech and Abimelech tells him to go out, and why would you have done this? We could have brought guilt upon ourselves. Someone might have slept with your wife here. It says in verse 12, and Isaac sowed in the land and reaped in that same year 100-fold, and Yahweh blessed him. So it's like, in spite of Isaac trying to take blessing into his own hands, God's still blessing him. This is still the chosen family that he's going to bring a blessing through. Okay. So then we need to move on a little bit here and go to Genesis 27. Let's see where we want to set out. Genesis 27. So now we have the birthright stolen. Now we have Jacob stealing Esau's blessing. Okay. And this one, it involves Isaac. So now Jacob and his mother Rebecca, right, are going to scheme. They're going to try to trick Isaac into giving him the blessing, because the blessing is supposed to go the firstborn. God has already said he's going to bless Jacob. We've already mentioned that. But now Jacob and Rebekah are going to make this plan to try to scheme to get the firstborn blessing. And ironically, like through their scheming, they accomplished the thing that God said he was going to do. So, like, God is still at work somehow through like these people who are like confused and trying to do things on their own terms. Because he does actually get the blessing here. So he tricks him. And then interesting too, so we talked about blessing, we talked about curse. Somebody read 27, let me see. So this is after Jacob's talking with his mother, and they're talking about whether or not they're going to go through with like this plan. So somebody read 27 verse 13 for me.
His mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice and go.
Yeah, because Jacob is saying, well, what if my father actually curses me and doesn't bless me? And so she's going to say, let your curse be upon me if that happens. And then also, I mean, I think like we don't hear about Rebecca after this really. Like Rebecca's not really in the stories anymore. We don't really hear much about her. So in some sense, like, oh yeah, she said, bring the curse upon me for tricking. Yeah, she's not really mentioned anymore. She doesn't come up much more in the story. So there's again the tension of like, are you going to get a curse or are you going to get a blessing? And they're trying to scheme to try to get the blessing as much as they can for themselves. Okay. And then so what does happen? You recall the story. What happens with Jacob and Esau and Isaac and the blessing?
Jacob is given the greater portion of the blessing. Esau is then blessed, but in a way lesser manner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even said that he would serve and that he would be subject to his brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's even this interesting like interaction where he comes and Isaac's like, sorry, I already gave away the blessing. And Esau says, well, don't you have anything left for me? So what do you think is going on there? Why do you think he's given a blessing to Jacob? Okay, he's given the firstborn blessing. But the firstborn blessing doesn't necessarily mean he gets everything. Like in the law, if you read later into the Pentateuch, you get a double portion. So hypothetically, like there should be something left for Esau. But Isaac acts as if there is nothing left to get. He's like, I already gave the blessing to your brother. Like, what am I supposed to do now? So why do you think that is?
Would that have implied that he was trying to give Esau everything before? If Isaac had gotten his way and had not been tricked, would he have given Esau everything?
That's an interesting thought. I think so. I don't know if exactly that's the answer. I have a more like broad answer, I think, because it's hard. Like I've asked you a question, and it's a good answer, but it's hard to like drill down to the details. I think that it's hard to like give the specific exact details of like what's going on. Like maybe that could be part of it. But I do think it kind of shows us that, like broadly speaking, Isaac is still in this mindset of there's not enough blessing to go around. So I think it's still that God is like blessing everybody, even Ishmael, who's in the wilderness, right, is going to get a blessing from God. So God is blessing everybody, and he's blessing the chosen line that's going to go out. But these people that he's blessing through, they still cannot get it through their like thick skull that there's enough to go around. And they're like, I already gave it to your brother. Like, what am I supposed to do? So you're like, Isaac, there's got to be more like, now he is, of course, the like chosen one that's going to get the greater blessing, but there should still be blessing to give to Esau. So anyway, that's just something to like ponder on. It's not something that I would make like a major exegetical point on, but it is at least interesting that he says like, I don't have anything for you. And then he has to kind of get something out of him. And he does finally, like he said, like he gives him something, but then he's like, yeah, but your brother's going to rule over you. So it's interesting. Okay. So let's see, where do we want to settle in here? We've got to keep going. So let me look at my time. We've got 121. We have to what, 150? Oh no, we don't have much time, do we? Okay. So we've got to get through Jacob. All right, what else happens to Jacob? I'll let y'all tell me what happens to Jacob at this point in the story.
And he has like two main reasons of why he flees.
Okay.
First of which is to get rid of it, to get away from his brother who has some reason to be angry at him for, for whatever reason. Yeah. But then also to go and find a wife from Laban's family.
Yes. So he's going to go and he needs to find a wife. He's got to get away from his brother who's trying to kill him. In Genesis 28, he's going to have this vision, and God's going to tell him that he's going to essentially bless him by giving him the land at some point in the future. So God is still talking to him. God's still going to bless him. And then we meet this guy named Laban. And Laban is like, if Jacob is the deceiver, well, now with Laban, he's kind of met his match a little bit, right? Because what does Laban do? What's his big trick that he plays on Jacob? Switches the daughter, so he marries the wrong one. Yeah. And he works for him for 7 years. He's worked for 7 years so that he can get so he can have a wife. And then at the last minute, Laban switches them. And he says, no, we marry the firstborn. So you've got the firstborn daughter as your wife now. And then they have to wait a week. That's the wedding ceremony, right? Wedding feast lasts a week. So then they wait a week and he says, okay, now I will give you the other daughter, the one that you really want. However, you're gonna have to work another 7 years. So now Laban is getting, and so it's like Laban is getting a blessing out of Jacob, right? He's like, all right, well, you're going to play your game. I'm going to get something out of you. Like, I'm going to marry my daughters off and get both of them hitched. All right, that's good. And you're going to work with me for 14 years. So I'm going to get some labor out of you. And Laban even says later when Jacob decides to leave, he's like, I know that I've been successful and I've been blessed because of you. I know that's because God has blessed you and because you're with me. I know that's why I've been blessed as well. And all of my flocks and all of my things have grown. And I'm very wealthy now. Because Laban's not going to want him to leave when it's time for him to try to go back home. Because Jacob has all these children. Again, we have the problem of like these wives who are bickering and angry with each other. We have the problem of infertility, that they're going to have children. But eventually Jacob is going to have all of these children. Okay. So at this point, he's had 11 children, and it doesn't seem Benjamin's born yet. And he's going to go out, right? And he's going to leave, but he has this kind of tricky thing he does. We don't have a lot of time to like dive into it. But with the flocks, it's a little bit confusing if you just read it, like what's going on with the flocks that Jacob takes. Essentially, Jacob is trying to play this like trick on Laban to get more of his flocks than Laban has planned. So he says, I'll take the speckled ones, the ones that have stripes and things like that. Well, so Laban's plan is he's going to go hide the ones that have stripes. So then when Jacob goes to see the flocks, there's not that many of them left for him to take with him. Then he like does this weird thing where he takes like a branch, right, and like scrapes it out, and he shows them like the colored branch. There's different thoughts on like what exactly is going on there. It seems that in some ancient world, people, they believed that if you were to show bright colors to an animal, for some reason they would like make more offspring. It's kind of like a weird like thing. It seemed like Jacob, the point that I'll get out right here is Jacob thinks he's doing some kind of scheme right here. He's scheming, he's doing all these things to try to get more flocks that he can take with him, the speckled flocks, and he's going to separate them out and stuff while Laban's not there. Meanwhile, it seems like God has just like supernaturally like made the flocks just like blessed, which is the story of Jacob's life, right? Is that he's like tricking to get something God's already going to give him, and God's already doing it. It's like, so then he's going to do that, and he's going to leave, and Laban's going to be upset. But he does eventually leave, and leaves with lots of flock, and he's very wealthy because God has blessed him. So then he's got to go now, and who has he got to face if he's going to go back home? Esau. Yeah. And he's like, I want to face him. He's not going to be happy with me because I haven't seen him in all these years. So he's very nervous to meet Esau. So he does all these things to try to ease that situation. But then, let's focus on Genesis 32 for a minute, and then we've got to go to Joseph. We're going to run out of time. So Genesis 32, 22 through 32. Does somebody want to read Genesis 32, 22 through 32?
During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 slave women, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream along with all his possessions. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled, and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. "Your name will no longer be Jacob," he said. "It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. Jacob then named the place Peniel, "For I have seen God face to face." He said, "Yet my life has been spared." The sun shone on him as he passed by Peniel, limping because of his hip. That is why still today the Israelites don't eat the thigh muscle that is at the hip socket, because he struck Jacob's hip socket at the thigh muscle.
Yeah, there's like weird things going on here. So what sticks out to you if we start from verse 22 and we start to read through? Anything that you want to point out? Did you notice?
The naming thing,
Okay.
where the man, angel, God, however the interpretation goes, asked Jacob his name and then changed his name.
Mhm.
And then Jacob asked the man his name. And he's like, "I don't even know my name." Just doesn't say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
He doesn't know his name, but he blesses him there. And then Jacob says, "I have seen the face of God."
yeah,
And wrestle. But his name is changed to Israel. And that's important because like that's kind of the story of Israel, right? In the Old Testament, is that they are the ones that wrestle with God. And throughout this whole story, all these people that are that Jacob has come from, and Jacob himself, they're wrestling with God while he's trying to give them a blessing, and they're wrestling with him for the blessing. Okay. So it's interesting. Anything else that sticks out?
I just think it's interesting that maybe I'm wrong, but it says like the text doesn't tell us that he's wrestling with God, but he somehow knows that he's
Yeah.
wrestling with God. It's like, hey, I'm wrestling with this man, but I'm not gonna let you go until you give me a blessing. And so it's just interesting to me like how he knew, but the text doesn't say, or maybe like he knows and like we just don't know what.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I think, maybe it's intentionally vague. One of the questions in these texts are always like, apparently the author of the text didn't seem like they needed to give us all the details here. And maybe that has to do with the fact that like an ancient audience would have been aware of some things that we're not aware of. So that's why we do like the work of trying to understand the history of the text and things. But also, like from narrative perspective, sometimes the author just doesn't seem to think that they need to tell us a certain thing like that, and they want to leave it for some kind of intentionality and purpose. Okay, but to go back, he wrestles with them, right, and he asks for a blessing. So it seems to be that like Jacob is wrestling, and he has some kind of like almost like superhuman will, apparently, that he's able to just like keep fighting and say like, no, I'm not going to let you go until I get this blessing that I need. You've got to give me a blessing. Because also we notice is like physically, this person or God who he's struggling with can hurt him pretty quickly, right? To where he's with a limp now. So physically, it doesn't seem like he's going to be able to take this person down, but like somehow spiritually, emotionally, like he's resilient. So the other thing to note, like, why does he hit him like in the hip socket and dislocate it? Have y'all read anything about this? Like why this is the case? Okay, that's fine. So he hits him in the hip socket, right? So he hits him in the inner thigh, okay? But he hits in the inner thigh like far enough up to knock his hip out of socket. So potentially, like it's like he's hitting him like in the crotch right here. So that's potentially what's going on. Okay, I know. I'm not trying. Y'all look at me like, what?
yeah.
Yeah, that's strange. But if he's doing that, so why do I bring this up? So why is that important at this point? Okay, if he's doing that, okay, where like the blessing to be fruitful and multiply, he's been fruitful, he's been multiplying, having all these children, and he's been scheming and he's been trying to take the blessing into his own hands. And at this point, he wrestles with God and he's hit in this place where he's not going to be able to do that anymore, right? If that's what's happening. So there's different interpretations. I'm not saying this is the only way, but I think it's possibly what's going on. Because also, the only son left to be born is Benjamin. Potentially, Benjamin has already been conceived. Okay. So all the other children have been born, and then after Benjamin, no more children are going to be born from Jacob. So I'm just throwing out that's a possible way to understand what's going on. I know that it seems kind of odd. You're kind of like, okay, what are you talking about right now? But I do think like that's possibly like part of what's going on, because that is like where the blessing has to come from. That if he's going to have children, he's going to multiply. That's what has to happen. Okay. So then the hip socket gets knocked out of place. Okay. So then, okay, we've got to move on and keep going. So with that into Jacob's story right there. So good way to end it. But Jacob and Esau do make up. He goes back to Bethel. Rachel dies. Benjamin is born, like we talked about. That's the last child to be born. And then we've got to go on to Joseph now. So we've only got a few minutes. We've got to do all of Joseph here. So we're going to try to go kind of quick. So let's read Genesis 37, 1 through 4. Can somebody read that? 37, 1 through 4.
Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Jacob brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Jacob more than his other sons, because he was the son of his old age. And the man made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him.
All right. So what do we notice already? There's similarities or patterns to things that have happened before. Again, we've reached a new generation. Joseph and his brothers. Okay. What are they like? Yeah. Again, we have like more sibling rivalry. Okay. But now, before we had two brothers who didn't like each other. Now we have 12 brothers, and like a bunch they all can't stand Joseph. Okay. And then where the other brother, right, Esau, is going to he's going to say, I'm going to try to kill Jacob, but Jacob flees. Now, what do we know happens with these brothers? What do? Yes. They plot and scheme to get rid of him, and they throw him into a pit, and they sell him into slavery. Right? He's going to go to a place where he doesn't know. He's going to be away from home, and he's going to be sold as a slave. Like what worse way could you possibly treat your brother doing something like that, right? So the sibling rivalry is like ramped up here to where they're going to do like the most horrible thing you can imagine to their brother to send him off. Okay. And so again, we've got to move a little quickly here. We've got Genesis 38, which is like an interesting text that seems to break up the story. Without going into a lot of detail, we get a very negative picture of Judah in chapter 38, right? I think it is important to the narrative because it's setting up Judah as this other character in the story who we're going to see here is we perceive him as very negative in the story, and we're supposed to. But then towards the end of the story, we're going to see that Judah is going to be seen in a more positive light. So I think part of it is like underlying, there's the transformation of Judah. So like the story is mainly tracing Joseph, but we're going to see a transformation in Judah as we go on before. Because all the brothers have sold Joseph. So we're already thinking pretty negatively about them. Like they're not good people. And then Judah is going to have this encounter with Tamar. We see again, oh man, he's not a righteous person. But then like the other thing that we know, because we're like reading the whole Old Testament, the line of Judah is going to be where, right, like the kingly ruler and Messiah is supposed to come from. So there's going to be like a movement here that's going to happen. So then chapter 39, let's see what we have here in 39. Joseph's going to be in Potiphar's house. And we see that in verse 2, Yahweh is with Joseph. And he's a successful man. And everywhere that he goes, like things are doing well. So his brothers sold him off into slavery. But now he comes to this place and he's being successful and God is blessing him. And all these great things are happening. But then we have the Potiphar's wife. So what happens with Potiphar's wife? Yeah, she makes a move, right? So she's going to try to get him to sleep with her. And if you've read any of the stories of Genesis so far, Like we talked about patterns being set up and expectations. What are you thinking now? You're like, oh no, this isn't good. Yeah, because you're like, man, you're in trouble because all of the like people in Genesis add like sexual choices throughout, right? And so they're like prone to this thing. So now you see Joseph coming like, oh, man, is it again another case where the son's going to be just like the fathers that come before him? He's going to make the questionable choice here. But no, so Joseph doesn't, right? So Joseph is the one he's going to resist. So now we're seeing that Joseph, he's trusting God, he's making the right moral choices. And so Joseph seems to be like, okay, maybe Joseph is like breaking this pattern of people who try to take the blessing, and he's just going to accept God's blessing, and he's going to go with the things that happen. And because this is the right choice that he makes, but where does it land him? In prison, which does not seem to be a blessing. It's not the place you want to be, certainly, right? So it's going to land him in the wrong place, he feels like, but God's still at work. The other thing to note here, I should have mentioned this earlier as well. What do we associate with Joseph with often in like just like popular literature?
Garment.
Yeah, the coat of many colors, the garment, right? So he gets the garment from his father, and it's taken off of him. His brothers throw him into the pit. They dip it in blood and they use it against him. Now, what happens here with Potiphar's wife as well? She pulls off his robe, right, his clothing, and then she uses that to say, "Look, his clothes are still here because he was trying to abuse me, and that's why it's still there." So the clothing in the Joseph story, we'll try to hit on a little bit. Clothing is really important in the Joseph story because it signifies Joseph's status and where he is. If he's lifted up or if he's brought down, people are trying to, at this point, use those articles of clothing against him. So it's like a literary kind of motif that's coming up again of Joseph's clothing. So God is still blessing and favoring Joseph at this point, but he's going to prison. And so this is the point where he starts to interpret these dreams, right? So we already heard earlier in 37 that he has these dreams that he tells to his brothers, and that's why they hate him. Now he's going to interpret the dreams of people he meets in prison. And so that's going to, he interprets this chief cupbearer's dream, and he says that the chief cupbearer is going to be raised up. And lo and behold, he is raised up, and Pharaoh brings him back to his position. And then it says that he forgets about the chief cupbearer was supposed to remember Joseph. Well, he forgets about him for a while, but he doesn't forget about him forever, because now in 41, Pharaoh's going to have a dream. And when Pharaoh has a dream, now the cupbearer remembers, oh yeah, there was like this Hebrew slave in the jail, and he was like really good at interpreting dreams. Oh, that's cool. I should probably go call that guy. So they go get him, and right, he's going to be able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, that there's going to be 7 years of abundance, 7 years of blessing, and then there's going to be 7 years of not enough, of famine, right? And so when Pharaoh hears about this, then he says, oh man, we got to do something about this. So go to chapter 41, verse 37. This is really interesting. This is where Joseph is going to rise to power. So he's interpreted the dream. And then let me just read 37. I don't know how far I'm going to go yet. And the plan was good. So also Joseph gives him a plan for what to do. Like, we got to store grain for 7 years because there's going to be 7 years of famine. So the plan was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of all the servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom the spirit is the spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all known to you, and there is no one as discerning and as wise as you, you shall be over my house. And to your word, all my people will submit. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Okay. So now this is interesting because we haven't heard any references to the spirit of God in quite a while, not until we go back to like Genesis 1. But now Pharaoh is looking for a man who has the spirit of God in him, right? Which is really interesting because now we learn, oh, Joseph is that person. Joseph is a person who has the spirit of God because he's wise and he's discerning and he lets God determine good and evil and he follows him. He trusts God for a blessing, right? And he uses that blessing to bless the people around him. So all these things are going on. So this is really interesting that that's going on. Then what we see, if we go down just a few verses, verse 42 here. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his finger and put it on the finger of Joseph. And he clothed him with garments of linen, and he put a chain of gold around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot, and they cried before him, kneel. And Pharaoh set him over all the land of Egypt. So now we talk about clothing. What's his clothing now? Yeah, so he starts with this like special coat from his father, and then it's ripped off of him. And then he has this outfit that's torn off of him by Potiphar's wife. Okay, so these things are being used to bring him down. But now Pharaoh elevates him, and Joseph here, he's going to be a blessing to the people. He's wise. He's going to learn how to save grain in this time of abundance, so they have it when there's a time of need. Okay, and he is the image of Pharaoh. When he rides around, you say, oh, that looks like Pharaoh because he's got Pharaoh's ring, he's got the outfit, and he's in the chariot. So again, we're going back. If we go all the way back to Genesis 1, right? Like the people are supposed to be an image of God. And when they're an image of God, they fill the earth and they multiply and they're a blessing and they rule over. So now Joseph, we're not in the right place yet, right? We'll come back to that. We're in Egypt, but he looks like an image of the Pharaoh. He looks like an image of the king, and he's exercising authority. And he's doing things that are going to bring about blessing, and he trusts God. So now we see Joseph is like starting to fulfill this kind of ideal that we have here. So we got to see what's going on. Now, really quick, Joseph's brothers have to come to him to get food, right? And Joseph does this thing where he like sends them back, and they have to get Benjamin because they didn't bring Benjamin with them. And you might ask, like, why does he do all this stuff? Why doesn't he just tell them who he is? So we could talk more detail, but we have to do a little quick. I think the main thing just to emphasize here is that Joseph now is testing his brothers. We talked about the test, right? Because how did his brothers treat him? They hated him, and they threw him in a pit, and they sold him into slavery. So now he's going to tell them, bring Benjamin back, one who your father loves, and he's going to bring him, and he's going to test them, because then when he sends them out with Benjamin to go back home, he puts his cup, his special like gold cup, into the bag that belongs to Benjamin. And so then when they find it, actually he sends his like guards to come and get it. And they say, we didn't steal anything from you. And if you find it in one of our bags, you can have that person, like put that person to death. You can take them. And they open the bags and lo and behold, where is it? Oh no, it's in Benjamin's. So then this is like the ultimate test to see, are they going to do what they did to Joseph and say, sorry, Benjamin, we're going to sacrifice you for the good of everything else? Or is someone going to step up and do something? Are they going to protect Benjamin, their youngest brother, who their father loves, right? They could say, father loves Benjamin. Let's get rid of him, just like they did with Joseph, but they don't. And then who is the one that steps up? Now it's Judah, right? So now Judah, so that's where we're seeing the progression of Judah's character. We saw in the beginning, Judah's this negative character, but now Judah is the one who's going to step up. He's already promised his father he would take care of Benjamin. And then when he goes to Joseph, again, they don't know it's Joseph yet. He's going to say, you cannot take this boy. If you take this boy, my father will die. Take me instead. Right? So he's going to try to put himself into the place of Benjamin. All right. And then at this point, Joseph's like, all right, you've passed the test, right? They cared for their brother. And they didn't just sell him off for their own benefit and things. So now we're seeing like it come kind of like full circle here with the story of Joseph, that the brothers, they've changed to some degree, right? And then what's going to happen is that Joseph is going to bring them all in, right? So Joseph's going to bring them and he's going to settle them in the land in Egypt. So we get to Genesis, 47 and 48, 49, 50. He brings them to the land. He brings Jacob and he settles them into the land. In Genesis 50, you have that verse that we all know in verse 20, where Joseph is able to reflect back on everything and say, I'm not angry with you because the things you planned for evil, God planned for good. So we see this whole time, it's like this ideal figure that trusts in God's blessing, because what you planned for evil, God used for good. And Joseph doesn't take things into his own hands to try to pull a blessing away from someone else, to try to trick somebody. Joseph is now the one who he trusts God, and he gets the blessing, he gets the abundance, and he takes his family, he says, come be a part of it. Come join in the blessing that we have. We have enough here. So come and let me settle you in this land of Goshen, and you're going to have everything that you need. So he takes care of them. Now, we've almost got like everything, or we don't have like all the pieces. So, right, there's this yearning to get back to like this Eden ideal. And in some sense, we do have a blessing like restored, right? That there is something, but they're not yet in the right place. right? They're not in the promised land. They're in Egypt. And so when Jacob is going to die, he makes Joseph promise that you have to take my body back. You have to bury it with Abraham in Abraham's tomb. You have to bury it with my fathers in Canaan, in the promised land, right? Because Jacob's like, I cannot die here. This is not the promised place. So even though there's all these blessings, all these things that seem to be going right, there's still an uncertain, there's still a longing, there's still something more that needs to be done. And so we come to the end, and we don't yet have the Exodus ideal. People are blessed. They're in the wrong spot. And so there's a need, right? Because they're not in the right spot, they cannot yet dwell with God like they did in Eden. It's one of the big things that we're missing. Like they're not dwelling with God. But that's going to be, right? But like the rest of the Pentateuch is going to talk to us about. So when you get to Exodus and Leviticus, you're going to learn more about like, okay, how do they actually dwell with God, with his people? Because the blessing that's in Egypt, of course, it doesn't stay the same way. It doesn't last in this sense that is at the end of Genesis. So let me read for you Exodus 1:1-7, right? Because this is what we're leading into, and then we'll leave off it. So Exodus 1:1-7. And these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They each came with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all those who descended from Jacob were 70 individuals, and Joseph was in Egypt. And Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all of that generation. And the Israelites, they were fruitful and multiplied, and they were many, and they were very, very numerous, and the land was filled with them. So there's still blessing, but here, verse 8. And a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. That's where we leave off. So that's where y'all pick up, presumably at some point, is that there's a problem here. We got to figure out what's going to happen. Right. Do you have something?
Yes, about your quiz or your test this weekend. I have some comments for you. I will tell you what Jeff said, and then I will translate for you all what this actually means. So, and I quote, you can tell them to grow up and read the book of Genesis, take notes, study those notes, major people, major events, and significant chapters. Here's my translation for your sanity. Your sanity. What I would do is I would just literally start at Genesis 1, and I would say what happens in Genesis 1. And I would say, what are the main themes? Who are the main characters? Joseph sold into slavery. Who is he sold into slavery to? Those are the kinds of details that I think you need to know. And so if you just did a chapter by chapter, main point, main theme, what happened there, specific details when it comes to people groups and lineages and things like that, I would make note of that and just keep it fresh and just kind of know what's going on chapter by chapter. So hopefully that helps you more than what Jeff will need to tell you. Michael, word of the day?
With what?
What's the word of the day?
Oh, you need a word of the day? What do you want the word of the day to be?
What happened?
Yeah, right.
Hip socket.
Hip socket. Hip socket is the word of the day. All right, thank you guys. I really appreciate you letting me come and teach you. Thank you.
You